everybody, and welcome to a Pastrami Nation Special. This is a Tech Off, the Battle of AI Art. My name is Nolan Smith. I am the editor and co-founder of Pastrami Nation, the meat of pop culture. And joining me today, of course, if you are a fan and a viewer of the Pastrami Nation podcast, you know the man himself. I call him the godfather of toys all the time, but today I'm going to just call him Christian Nacorda. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
And then we have somebody who I've known for a very long time. He's extremely knowledgeable in the tech world, and I'm super excited for this. Let's go ahead and welcome Mr. John O'Connor.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to do this. We are going to dive into a hot button issue. And it's something that everybody's talking about right now. I've tried it out myself, and it is AI art. So let's dive into first, what is AI art? Like we see the pictures. We see the pictures of like He-Man and the movie, and he has like 10 fingers on one hand. Who wants to jump in there and let's just talk about the basics? What is AI art?
John, take it away.
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot here. So AI art is essentially art that's been generated by a special type of artificial intelligence called a neural network. And the technology to do these neural networks have been around for a lot longer than you might expect, since the 1980s. But in recent years, with more modern graphics cards, better processing systems, and also AI art sort of builds itself in layers. So each time you start a new AI neural network, you kind of start with all of the previous sum of every AI that's ever been built as a starting point. It's kind of like if you could copy and paste a brain from the most brilliant artist in the world and then just start from there as your beginning of your art journey. So AI art is leveraging these advanced AI systems, all of this technology to then generate artwork for various purposes, right? And for better or worse, sometimes the results are weird, sometimes they're excellent. Certainly they're becoming newsworthy, and we're seeing a lot more of it lately. So yeah, that's I guess in a nutshell AI art. And Christian, anything to add to that from the art side of it?
So I know that a lot of the way that the AI art is done, and I haven't done it myself. I mean, if you've been on social media for the last couple of weeks, everybody's been seeing it. Everybody's been posting their AI selfies, right? And from what I understand is you're uploading a certain amount of selfies of existing actual photograph selfies of yourself, entering in prompts, and then you are returned with 10, 15 selfies, right? But I know that those prompts are still based on AI learning from artwork that it's been fed, and which is a kind of a big issue that I want to get into, because that's one of the big issues that I want to get into, is the artwork that's being fed to it, because that's kind of been the issue from the artist's point of view. At least one of them. So I think also the big thing that we are all seeing right now with the AI art is the visual side of it. As a visual artist myself, obviously this is where I have a lot to say about it. But I think the thing that people are talking less about is the creative writing side of AI, is how you can prompt for storytelling and where it's gotten. And I think when you prompt an AI for a story, you kind of have certain expectations, or like, oh, it's going to be rough, but it's not so rough anymore. So it's not just the visual arts that are being threatened, if you want to say, by AI art, but the creative writing side of it as well. But
yeah, makes sense.
Now,
so yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Well, I want to jump into. So I'm a teacher, and this is a subject I posed to a class last week. We talked about AI art, and we talked about the pros and cons of what students feel AI art brings to the table and what it doesn't. So I want to run through some things with you real quick. One, it just goes right in what you were saying, Christian. It enables writers to show their ideas visually, which can help big time in production, right? If you're doing storyboards and you're trying to convey what you see for your script, but you want the artist to be able to transpose it and create actual art, you can give them an AI art thumbnail. You can get sketches done much faster. It's an evolution of our generation, is what one student put. Um, but on the cons, it takes away work. It can take away work from traditional artists. Does it steal from actual artists? And this is one that students really had questions about, and that's one I'd want to ask you, John. So with AI art, is it stealing from artists to create what it's doing? And if so, is it ethical?
That's a really good question. So AI art, the AI, the neural networks that are developed to generate art, they are looking at source material, right? They have to be trained on a set of images. Now, what that means, essentially training, it's not, it's not any kind of magic. It's all numbers, right? The images are turned into numbers. And essentially what happens is you take these two AI, one that generates images and one that recognizes them, and you pit them against each other. This is called an adversarial, generational adversarial network, or a GAN. And these two AI, sort of, one of them is trying to generate art to trick the other into thinking, hey, this is real or this is authentic. And so you are generating art in a specific style. And it really comes down to, there's sort of a question of what makes this art unique, and are we copying the thing that makes this art unique? And that's an excellent question. I think in some contexts you could consider it stealing. There's been a big sort of issue with programming AI and GitHub. They've trained it on all these open source libraries, and in some cases the code is being directly produced, right? It's lines of code or snippets of code that were written by a person. And so you do have this sort of element of cloning that can happen. And it's very hard to control that from a GAN, because, it's essentially just generating these based on weights and numbers. It's not a person in there, toggling things and making sure that it's not being copied, right? So certainly an ethical concern. The question here is, when it comes to artwork, right, are you copying somebody's style anyway as an artist, right? Are there elements of your art that you remember or picked up from other artists, and would that be considered copying, right? So I think it's an excellent question to ask. And I think from a technological perspective, I think it's a possibility that it could be copying some elements. But, Christian, maybe you have some insight on the art side. Do you consider an AI trained on your images to be copying you or copying your style?
So there's kind of two things with that. Like, the thing is, the technology is really new and there isn't really a precedent for any of this. So there's not like anything protecting the artist specifically from this. There's already been like a couple of instances. And like, if you guys are familiar with art, Kim Jung-gi really recently, probably one of the greatest illustrators to ever live, recently passed away a few months ago. 2 days after he passed away, his artwork was fed into an AI against his wishes. Like, he never wanted it. His family, his estate never requested it. And that's just like one instance. Carla Ortiz, a prolific designer, specifically for Marvel, like, Doctor Strange. She very vehemently requested against her artwork being fed or used to train AI. And it was like thousands of her pieces of work is doing this. So, like, again, there's not really any kind of protection for that. Even at the request of people not wanting their artwork to be used for this, it's still happening. You know what I mean? For what sake? You know what I mean? And ultimately, people are profiting on the backs of artists' work. You know what I mean? None of this would be possible with all of the art without the artwork. All these hardworking artists. That being said, yes, you're right. Like, actual artists, that's how art is, but I think the difference is, like, with artists, they might train under a certain person for a long time, you know what I mean, and adapt those skills to continue that legacy, right? Or they're picking and choosing and deciding to I don't know, emulate certain artworks. But I think that's where evolution comes from too, right? We're building on top of this. I think the scary thing for me about if because ultimately it's artists can't compete. You know what I mean? Like I think there has always been this thing throughout history, like with the adventation of photography, right? A lot of artists were threatened. There was like hyper realism that was going on, and then all of a sudden, like because of it, postmodernism and um, you know post impressionism kind of grew from that. um, the difference with this now is it's not that it's replicating life, it's replicating the art, right? And now I think obviously, like if you can prompt a computer to do this instantly, then what's the use of any kind of artist, right? I think like I'm not personally threatened by it. I think I'll be fine. Like I do a lot of things, and there's still other forms of art that aren't yet being replicated by AI. But I think this is also going to like take away the incentive for like a lot of young artists. Like they might be getting into this and then realizing now like what's the point of it. Um, I don't look at this as like the death of art, but I think it's already okay. Look at like I'll say it like this: like Nolan, you're a graphic designer yourself, right?
Mhm.
And I think the big thing I just talked about this with students is like I don't do commissions, and I'm thankful that I don't do commissions because it sucks, dude. Nobody pays artists what they deserve. Like, and people make that excuse of like, well, it only takes you like so and so, like it takes you 2 hours to do this. Why are you charging so much? It took me like a lifetime of training to be able to do this in 2 hours. You know what I mean? So all of that is kind of, I just feel like it's easy to kind of enjoy this stuff when it doesn't directly threaten what you're doing. But as soon as like that happens, I always thought that creative arts was the thing that was safe from all of this, and now it's like absolutely not. Right. And that's fair. And I don't want to be like that old, like, oh, like, dude, it should be done. You know what I mean? So obviously it's going to force innovation. Right. But I don't look at it as like another tool. Like, I don't look at it as like, a like I think there's also that danger of like people not knowing the same thing. I was watching a YouTube video the same like or literally this week, and they were interviewing this older woman from Florida, and she was like at an art walk, and she was showing off like her artworks. And she had these paintings of flamingos, sure, but then she's like, I also have this, and she called it digital art, um, but it was AI generated art, right? And she was like, she literally said, and I'm quoting verbatim, um, she said, digital art is when an artist uses a computer. And so like there's a lot of people that can't differentiate the difference between digital art and AI art, and then we'll look at it the same. It's already been a problem, you know what I mean? I think I know a lot of artists that are only traditional and look at digital art, like digital painting, as like, oh, you just press a button. And like, no, Photoshop is another tool, Procreate is another tool. AI art is that. It takes no skill to like just enter in a prompt. So I don't know. I've got a lot to say about it. It's awesome technology and it's amazing, but I think it brings up the Jurassic Park thing. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should. I don't know. My take.
I think one thing everybody sort of agrees on is that it's disruptive in some way, right? Like we can clearly see that AI art is going to do something and it's going to be big. And the real question, I think, is what is the impact, right? I see, for example, having worked in the video game industry, I've seen a lot of instances where our art team, very, very talented art team, was tasked with what I would call very mundane art tasks or production art tasks, things that do not challenge them as artists. They're simply tasks that needed to be done. And I could see in that context of like a video game, right, where you need to texture, you need to, design these 50 different corgis that do different jobs, right? You could, as an artist, train, develop your one character and then train the AI to then generate the variations for you and really save you a lot of time, maybe provide you a competitive edge with your, with as an artist with other, art firms or other companies. So I can see on the one hand, it's scary as an artist to say, this thing can generate art. But in some cases that might be useful for an artist. That might be something that gives you an edge over somebody else. And so, not to say that it's all good, of course, but I can also see some cases where, there's a lot of artwork that's done that's thrown away. A lot of artists generate tons and tons of art that just isn't used at the end, usually in a business context. So for them, it might be nice to save some of those cycles. Those are hours of your life spent with any tool, with a machine, with a Apple Pencil or with, a graphite pencil. That's your time, that's your life that you're spending doing it. So that might be a good way to sort of say, hey, I want to spend my time doing the real art that compels me, the stuff that makes my work interesting. And then all of this production stuff, we can kind of just, we can let AI sort of manage that. Then again, most of the great artists of history developed their skill while they were apprenticing with other artists and doing exactly that, the production art. So that may be an interesting take on it, right? Like a different side of it.
And I think that's super valid, right? Like I again, I don't want to be that like person who's going to completely reject something, because I think that's, as an artist in an emerging field, is a dangerous stance to take, because again, you're ignoring, like, I work with a lot of teachers that have rejected technology and they're out of touch. Who knows? It might all come circling back to them in the end after all of this. But yeah, I specifically teach like entertainment design. I teach at art center. If you guys are familiar, if anybody listening is familiar with art schools, I teach at art center. I teach at Brainstorm. I teach at CJMA. I also teach locally at Cal State Northridge. And we, I literally, we're going through finals right now. I totally agree, because there are a lot of steps in the process that, is just really time consuming. There's changes that happen. There are like little mundane things that would be helpful if I could utilize, like, even just the thumbnail process. If you want to come to me, I set up some prompts with an AI. You choose which of these you like, and then I'll flesh the rest of it out, like by hand. That's great. But then in the long run, if that's going to be a time saver for like a company, for anything, then where do we draw the line? Like, at what point can we like say, okay, now I'm going to get an artist? If I could just keep using AIs the whole time, I could just eliminate the artist completely. That might be a super huge benefit for like a really small, like maybe there's a team of like 3 people that are trying to get like a video game off the ground. But then that's also just jobs lost for like a lot of hardworking artists that have trained their whole life. And that is scary. That is terrifying. I've been making this whole push that like artwork, especially for the industry, has been digitized in the last 10 years and pushing students to be very digital. And now I feel like it might be turning back. I think like, I think the one thing that's safe from all of this, hopefully, is like fine art, which I'm not a fine artist. I don't consider myself a fine artist, because that's still something, but there's probably going to be people that want that, like just to say it was like this beautiful piece of art was created by AI. So
yeah, I think as a programmer, right, I'm an engineer, but most of my work in my career has been coding. And one thing that rang it home to me is when I saw the Chat GPT generating code and it actually kind of working. That scared the hell out of me a lot. Yeah. And it was a very poignant message to me, like, okay, I can see where these artists are coming from. And I've always assumed that at some point code would no longer need to be written, but we would still need to describe the problem to machines, right? Maybe we don't have to describe how to solve it anymore, but certainly we need to describe what the problem is, because a machine cannot derive what problems we really need solved. What's a compelling use case? So far, hopefully, maybe I could be wrong, right? But interesting point about fine art too is that it will be very difficult, I think, if an AI is trained to develop fine art, maybe very difficult to determine what is human generated, what is AI generated. And I know right now, I think AI art is not subject to copyright in a lot of cases. So you have this sort of legal gray framework as well, where say your work is 80% you and then 20% AI, can you still copyright it? And there's an interesting segue into like blockchain and NFTs that come from art as well. And these are more like validating art, right? The NFT is like a signature. And so if you have a piece of artwork you've generated and it's packaged with a signature in the form of an NFT, now you have proof that you, as the artist, did this artwork. That could be an interesting sort of parallel piece there. Maybe the anti-AI, right? Like you were saying with photographs, it disrupted art in the sense that we went from hyperrealism to sort of more abstractionist type paintings and artwork. And it could be that now, in the future with AI art being so prevalent, perhaps these digital signatures are the way to say, hey, no, this was a human, it was done by hand. And there's still a lot to be said about that. A paint on canvas is still really beautiful. And you don't get that texture from anything other than acrylic, right? So there's some interesting other technologies that are sort of swirling around in this same space too. AI art is, coming into being, but it's also coming into being at a time when you have truly like mathematically validatable signatures, things that you can guarantee were 100% correct and authentic, right? So interesting point in fine art, I think, is that you have this other technology sort of swirling around it too.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of brought it up to going back to the idea of like coding, because you can, I mean, there's still, as of right now, that human element of us entering the prompt, right? Or bringing up the problem that we need the AI to solve. So, but yeah, that's terrifying. I think with everything that you do, with everything that I do, all of us, we do, like we've worked really hard to develop a skill to be able to become useful in the workforce, but now like AI can do that with no time, right? Without complaining, without needing like a 401k, or without needing health benefits. So it's like, if you could just be like, oh, I need this, I need a code for this, and it's just like, here you go. Like, or like, I can't figure out what's wrong with my code, and it'll just correct it easily. Then it's like, holy crap, that's I took a couple of classes in coding, and like I couldn't do it to save my life, but and I applaud anybody that can think creatively in that workspace. So
it's a skill. I'm sorry, it's a skill in the same way that artwork is, right? It's a talent you cultivate more than anything, right? So it's scary to think that all of that time could be relegated to uselessness. And we saw it in the 60s and 70s with factory work. We saw people get replaced with machines. It's a pattern, right? And and economically, we've never recovered from it. We went from a single breadwinning household to then needing both parents to work, to still not quite making enough. And we've seen the value of our currency deflate over time. So it's scary, and the fact that could happen is really scary, and it very well could. We're on the precipice of a new set of technologies.
Absolutely. So I think we lost Christian. That's why the screen got all funny right there. Let me go ahead and take the overlay off. That way,
no worries.
See everybody. Oh, there's everybody right there, and then we're going to go.
Hello.
And we're just going to flop to another background real quick.
No worries. Hopefully he'll be able to jump back in here. Nice. There you go.
There we go. So I agree. And one part I wanted to bring up was it's scary for the youth that we're trying to prepare to get ready to enter the workforce, and then to say, well, maybe you don't, maybe these skills aren't going to be employable. I had both John and Christian speak to different classes that I have for a charter school I work for, and to talk about what they do in their jobs and what is done for them, where they're able to go with it. Like Christian has worked for video game studios, and he's an art teacher for a number of colleges. John has done so much programming work, and he's done work with NASA with engineering and everything. So um, I think it is scary to that point because we don't know what the cutoff will be. We don't know if it's going to be, okay, we can use this to a certain point, and then we need the human touch, no matter what it is, whether it's art, whether it's coding. Um, Otherwise, do we fall into, and it sounds silly, but like a sci-fi, scenario that computers do everything for us?
Yeah, and I mean, I think in my mind that the utopian world is the world of Star Trek, right, where you have everybody's basic needs met. Technology has solved all of the major problems of society, and now you have, human enrichment and exploration as being our primary focus, rather than attempting to just make money, right? It would be ideal if we had an environment where an artist could simply just be an artist, and they don't need to be an artist because it's a living. They can be an artist because it's an art, because it exists, right? So I think that would be a wonderful theory to have there. I think before we get to that point, right, we're going to see growing pains like we've seen with, the labor markets, and like we've seen with manufacturing. It migrates to the lowest cost market, and it's mechanated as much as possible, and still value in having, people know the process, right? Probably the highest paid programmers in the industry are people who know the old languages that nobody else knows anymore. Those languages are 50 years old and they're still useful. I think the techniques will always be useful. And for people who are entering into it now, students, youth, anybody that's trying to figure out where they're going to sort of set out into the world, I think there's still massive value in learning all of these techniques anyway. Right. We don't want to throw that away and say, well, my job's going to be replaced by AI anyway. I'm just going to throw my hands in the air, because we really do not know what's going to happen. And there are some parts that might be replaced with AI, but there are a lot of parts that may not. And if you are positioned, if you have the skill set and the knowledge to step in where the AI fails, a big thing about the GPT, right? And about, for example, a GPT here, I'm talking about Chat GPT, which is a language model that's been really popular. It just came out from OpenAI, and it allows you to generate text based on prompts and essays. And there's a bunch of stuff on social media. There are a whole bunch of TikToks about it. And the one thing that they're not talking about is this thing will write whatever you want. It'll write a gigantic essay about a book, but it's not necessarily accurate. It says very confidently, even if it says the wrong things, it says it very confidently. And if you don't know enough, if you don't know any better, you can start to generate. It can just as easily generate disinformation as it can information. It could very poorly summarize things, and the quality is, because it's generated by an AI. The quality is not guaranteed, and I think the human touch that that we mentioned here, I think that human touch will always be important. There will always be, even if it generates things well, computers cannot make a moral decision. And in some cases, there will be moral decisions to be made. Do we allow this AI to generate images of politicians in compromising situations that aren't actually happening? And do we allow it to then write an article about that and publish it as if it was real? And do we allow people to trust that AI when it's just spitting out the garbage it was fed? There's no fact checking, there's no authenticity or authentication there. And so there's a real concern of, even now, and I think for a long time, relying too much on the AI. This theme goes back to like RoboCop, right? We really trust the RoboCop to actually make moral decisions? We'll put a human in there, make sure it's a moral decision, and it's a theme that recurs for good reason. Isaac Asimov wrote a lot about robotics and artificial intelligences and the moral implications of what a society with those in it would look like.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's why we're gonna, at least right now, we're going to continue to see humanity play a part and the moral decisions that humanity can make. will continue to be there until some crazy AI is able to auto-generate that. But I think for right now, yeah, we as the human race still are needed in regards to all this. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You know, as we know, like you said, there's AI that can write a novel if you give it the information that you say, but like you said, it takes it as truth. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next with that. This is not the last time we're going to talk about AI art because and AI in general, because AI is it is the future. It's what we're living in right now.
Yeah.
So we'll
And
make
it's here
sure
to
we
stay.
yes, and we'll make sure we bring you more on that. I apologize. The weather has been crazy for a lot of us in Southern California, so I know the rain got crazy for Christian, so I think it knocked out his connection. Snowing over here, so you know
Oh,
that
nice.
could also play a part. But we will bring you more tech-centric, tech-off episodes. Let us know what you would want us to talk about. Do you want to dive into the world of NFTs, dive deeper into AI, dive into coding and coding in what manner? Let us know. Make sure you email me, Nolan, at pastramination.com. And make sure you follow us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're on Pinterest. You can find us just about everywhere. John, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. I really, and thank you to Christian, who I hope everything is fine with weather-wise. I hope to continue this discussion as we move forward, and I can't thank you enough for your time.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really, really great talking to you here, and I hope let us know what else you'd like to know about, and I'd love to be back, hopefully.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.